This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today we're with Chad Hufford. Chad is a lifelong Alaskan, born and raised in Anchorage, and started his financial practice in 2007. Veritas Wealth Management is now home for over 1,000 clients, 4 advisors, and 4 staff members. He has 6 children and 1 amazing wife. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's been fun to get to know you a little bit in the pre-show, hearing about your life and your family and your business. Tell us why Alaska and why financial planning?
Well, I was born here and I had a lot of pressure internally and externally to leave and do other things. My generation in Alaska kind of viewed staying in Alaska as settling. So my dream, my vision when I was late teen, young adult was to go get the hardest degree I could, become a hotshot surgeon. I went and got my degree in biochemistry. And in the last year of college, I read a book called Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray. And I met the woman who is now my wife, and it totally changed my course. You've got the book right there, Travis. And I'd spent 2 or 3 years trying to figure out, is this really what I want to do? Do I want to pursue this medicine thing? And I realized that I believe I had what it took to be an excellent surgeon, but I didn't think I could balance being an excellent surgeon and being an excellent husband and father. But with this industry, I could do both. I could be an excellent father and an excellent financial planner. And Nick Murray's been an inspiration to me. He's been a mentor for the past 15 years and a huge part of how I've been able to balance those things. And I started this with a passion for my family, and my passion for finance, my passion for financial planning grew out of that. But I, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't passionate about this work until 2008, 2009. I saw the destruction in our industry, and I realized how important it was to stand in the gap for investors.
Oh, it's so great. I was pulling this book off the shelf as soon as you said it. This is actually the reason I keep this on the shelf. I heard Nick Murray in person, and I bought the book, Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth, from him that day. And it's been an inspiration for me as an individual, but then as an advisor, because I did the same thing. Like I wanted to be a pilot, but I bailed on that industry because of the work-life balance. It was non-existent. And I thought, well, coming into this industry, surely I'm going to have a lot of balance. That's what everybody's telling me. But it's still a struggle, right? It was still a struggle to have balance. Tell us a little bit about maybe your definition of balance and maybe how that has shaped over the time with having, a family of 8, right? And
6 kids,
and running your own business in this industry. Because I know there's a lot of advisors that do struggle with it. Tell us a little bit about that delicate balance act.
Well, and it's interesting, a lot of advisors, running their own business. And I think a lot of advisors have a business that runs them more than they run a business. And that is not what I wanted. So I was very, very mindful and intentional when I started. If I was going to change careers for my family, that I needed to, you called it delicate. I need to be very careful with that delicate balance. But I feel like balance is more like riding a bike. Sometimes people talk about balance like it's static. But if you think about riding a bike, when you press down on a pedal, you shift your weight. There's a counterbalance in place. And if you stop and try to pause everything and find this perfect balance, you'll fall over. So it's a dynamic process. And it's something that I think we have to fight all the time. You mentioned in your book, the idea of setting up boundaries. I think that was very important to me very early on. Honestly, Nick Murray was a big part of that, being very proactive about setting up boundaries. So my work didn't consume me. And I want to make sure I take care of my faith, my family, and my fitness. Those are kind of the 3 areas that I want to make sure remain strong, because I'm at my best in this job if those 3 areas are strong.
Yeah, that's so good. I love the idea of being on the bike. I do a lot of bike riding, mountain biking, and the balance that you're needing there. You're exactly right. It's not just about not falling off the bike, but it's about progression, right? It's about growing. And I'll tell you, the first book that we wrote, Achieving Balance, it was all about this idea of just basically staying on the bike, but balance, growth, moving forward, having those boundaries, having, that balance that you have that can then move forward and progress is what so many advisors have basically shared with us on these podcasts, book interviews that we've been doing. And they said, hey, we want to scale our business and keep that balance, which essentially what you're saying is you kind of have to have both, right? So how have you been able to scale your business while keeping that delicate balance? I know you mentioned boundaries, so maybe go a little bit deeper with what does that actually mean? What does that look like for you, and anything else that has been helpful for keeping that balance?
Well, I'll start with, so Abraham Lincoln talked one time about this idea of chopping down a forest every day. And he said that if he had a forest that he had to chop down every day, he would begin each day by sharpening his axe. And I think a lot of us jump in each day with our axe. We're hacking away at these trees, and it's exhausting because we are not as sharp as we could be. We have to work much, much harder. So I begin each day with proactive measures. It's working out. It's spending some time reading, spending some time praying. I write every morning, do a little gratitude journal, and all those things sharpen me. So when I go into my day, I am already proactive. I've started my day exercising control over variables I can control. I'm not starting my day checking voicemails, checking email, reacting to the world around me. And that's been huge to build that momentum, beginning the day with that. And then I end my day promptly. I am usually home by 5:15. As you mentioned, I've got 6 kids and an amazing wife. And I have made it a point to make that time sacred. So I have those bookends on either side of my day. And what I found, Travis, I've compressed that time into a relatively short window, about 6 to 7 hours a day at my office. It actually forced me to become more efficient. I get more done because I have less time to waste. And the other side of that too is I've come to a point where, I don't take my laptop home with me. My phone goes on silent. It sits up on my counter. I don't have those distractions. And at first, you're worried. There's that self-doubt, that head trash that tells you, well, if you're not available to your clients, they're going to find somebody else. But if we're careful about the clients we bring on, that's not true. They actually have more respect for us when they realize this is a guy that practices what he preaches. He's not trying to just help us have a better life. He's protecting his own life as well, and they respect it. And the people that don't are not good clients anyways. The people that expect you to be available, to drop of a hat, they want to complain to you about every time that their account goes down 2%, or just, hey, I just read this article on some no-name media website that talks about the Armageddon coming. I want you to explain that to me. Those aren't the people we want to work with anyway. So it's forced me to be, I think, more picky. That sounds bad, but more picky about the clients I bring on. And by kind of having guardrails on my day, it has made me much more efficient and productive. I get more done in a short day than most people, I think a lot of advisors do, probably in a full week. I don't mean that to sound arrogant, but by creating a sense of urgency in my day, I'm much, much more intentional with a higher level of intensity.
You sound like you have been doing this a while. This doesn't sound like you started this yesterday. Like I can always tell, and the reason being is because of the conviction like you have behind your voice. Like you have done this, you have learned this. This is a process. And this is what I know about advisors is you got into this industry really for 3 main things: freedom, flexibility, yes, financial help of your clients, and the financial reward that you have to sell. So like really those 3 F's: freedom, flexibility, financial reward. And as a business owner, you want to share that with as many possible. You want to keep growing and scaling. So I love the fact that you have these boundaries super identified. Great examples. I give these very similar examples in my book, and I know that you've read that and you've had a great time because they probably resonated with you because you've been doing these things. So kudos to you. I do know this about all of us. We're not perfect. Even when I know I can listen to you and hear your boundaries and what you do really well to keep yourself balanced. But I also know that there's probably some things that are more difficult for you than maybe for others, right? I know what my Achilles heel is when it comes to balance, and I have to keep that in check. But for you, what would you say is, I don't know, maybe your biggest weakness when it comes to maybe losing that sense of balance? Where is it that you might step out of bounds a little bit here and there, Chad, that you might struggle with?
Well, on a personal level, I can tell you it is creating time with just my wife and myself. As you can imagine, with 6 kids, you guys have a big family as well. It's easy to get so busy. You're doing things as a family, but not taking the time for just my wife and I to have a dinner, to go for a walk, and whatever that looks like. Spending time in the evening just to chat about life. That's something that I've been working on because I realize that it is a weakness of mine. Professionally, I think, as we talked a little bit earlier on about just leveraging technology, there's so many tools out there that we are not utilizing as well as we could, because I do not want to dilute the value I provide to my clients. But the other part of that too is I think counting my wins differently. So when I was by myself, the sole advisor, or with just one staff person that was doing my paperwork and handling all the logistics, I was very focused on how many prospecting calls I was making, those outreach attempts, those types of things. But now what I've been trying to do is to not just coach investors, but coach my other advisors, and to be able to duplicate myself, almost make myself less relevant in the day-to-day. But it requires pouring into the people around me rather than just doing it myself. And that's easy for me and my personality to just see something needs to be done and just take care of it and kind of jump ahead of everybody, instead of delegating that and helping one of my junior advisors better understand that. Because the better I make them, the better this whole business scales, the better our clients are, the better off they are. Everybody wins. But if I just pin my ears back and charge ahead alone, it might be easier in that moment, but it doesn't make it easier in the long term. It's kind of like, helping a kid tie their shoe. If you tie it for them, it takes 5 seconds, not a big deal, 10 seconds. But then you're doing that 2 or 3 times a day for the rest of their life, instead of taking 5 minutes to teach them how to do it, and then they can do it on their own.
Yeah, well said. This teamwork effort, like, you've built a great team. And you have a great team at home. Like, I can see that there's a parallel here. You have a great team at home to support you, and you support them. You got a team at work where you support them and they support you. Like, it's a team. Yet, if you just do everything on your own, there's no way you can do it. You turn into what I call a do-it-all, and you'd lose really fast. But like you said, short term, you might get it the way you want it, briefly, but long term, it's a path to destruction. I remember when I started to feel this, and I was like, man, I took the papers from the right side of my desk and put them on the left side today. That's all I did. Right. Like, I'm doing everything myself at work and, possibly at home, because it was kind of controlling things. But I think that is a really good thing to pinpoint as a behavior that might be stopping you. When you've realized this is coming on and you're like, oh man, I'm doing this on my own, what helps you to change direction, to shift that energy, that focus to holding off and teaching? Because in the moment, I think this is where a lot of people struggle. They know that they're messing up, but they don't want to stop. Their ego is too attached to it. Their pride may be too attached to it. But what might work for you? What has worked for you to say, I'm going to stop this. I recognize what I'm doing is wrong here, and I want to shift?
Well, we're in the investment world, and that's what our business needs, is for us to make that investment. which might be a short-term sacrifice for a long-term payoff. It is not the easy choice in the moment. We're asking our clients to do that and invest the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month or whatever it is for their long-term goals. I need to be willing to do the same, not just with money, but with time, investing in the people around me, taking time to pause. And it will be a temporary sacrifice. It will cost me time today, but will save me time long-term. So just as we discussed offline with the podcast idea, it'll take time to get a podcast where it needs to be and a lot of time preparing. But as it gets better, you're saving much more time in the long run because you're able to be proactive. You're getting in front of clients with that proactive messaging. So you're not fielding a whole bunch of phone calls, hundreds of phone calls about inflation because you've already encouraged them. You've already taken the edge off of that fear, whatever is in the news that day, whatever we're supposed to be afraid of today. So yeah, it takes time on the front end, but it actually saves time on the back end. So just reminding myself of that. But the other thing too, Travis, I have to remind myself of is my first hire. When I was one of those things like, am I ready to have an assistant? Like, can I afford one? And then about 3 months after I hired my first employee, I was like, how did I ever manage without one? But it did take time. Like, okay, here's how we fill out these forms. Here's how we submit to compliance, all those different things. I don't even know how to do those things anymore. I do not know how to submit anything to compliance, how to fill out. I could not open up an IRA for myself if I wanted to right now. But there was a time where I had to pause and explain and teach. And Lindsay, my office manager, she picked up on things so quickly. And we look back now and realize I kind of taught her to swim by just shoving her into the deep end. But it still took time away from both of us. And now things are so much smoother. So I have to remind myself, Chad, you've done this before. Yes, it forces you to pause in the moment, but it makes for so much smoother progress in the future.
Yeah, I love that you said so many great things there. But how you're reminding yourself of the investment that you're making, because it is an investment. You're in the investment world, but also I totally recognize and remember the first time I hired someone as an advisor going, how in the world am I even going to pay this person? Like, I know we're doing well, but like there's a lot of fear, but over time, like, how can I do it without them? And I hired 2 more. And all of a sudden I was a team of 4 within like 6 months going, whoa, we've got something here. And then to see those, if you lose them, you have to replace them and train them. Like, you just know the value of not having to do those things that you shouldn't be doing anymore, that you should delegate, that you get off to a team that can even do it better yourself. So I really appreciate that. That makes a ton of sense. What do you think, as you've been in the industry, you've had experience, you've rubbed shoulders with other advisors, and even other business owners, what are some of the biggest issues for advisors who run their own business to have balanced growth?
I don't remember who said it, and I'm probably going to butcher the quote a little bit, but basically the idea is one of the most sinister and destructive forces against productivity is doing efficiently the things that need not be done at all. And I think a lot of advisors spend a lot of time doing things that, number one, don't need to be done at all, or number two, don't need to be done by them. I've got a colleague down in Southern California, and he's very successful, makes good money. He's got a great practice. And he asked me one time about these new forms that we were supposed to be using. And I said, I have no idea. I said, are you seriously still filling out forms? Like, you should have been done doing that. That should have been 20, 30 years ago. You stopped doing that. But he doesn't want to go through the process of hiring somebody and training and sifting through resumes. And I get it. Like, that's not fun. But that's an example of somebody who's managed, but he's got now a cap. He's got a lid on his practice because it's only him. So I think he's good at eliminating things that don't need to be done at all, but he's doing a lot of things that he doesn't need to be doing. And then I think a lot of advisors, whether it's, they're catching up on market commentary, or they're reading this talking head's new forecast. It's things that don't need to be done. And just a lot of time gets wasted. And I think by putting guardrails on my time, it forced me to push a lot of those things off my plate. I don't have time to mess with that. But if you really go down to it, Travis, I think a lot of time it's fear. We're afraid to pick up the phone and call those 10 prospects. We're afraid to call our clients whose mother just passed away and they're dealing with they're uncomfortable conversations, or they just stretch us outside of our comfort zone. So we fill in our time with fluff. We're checking emails. We're going back and forth. You mentioned your book, the idea of task switching. James Clear wrote a book, and Atomic Habits, and he talks about this idea of residue, cognitive residue, where you switch from one task to another, just like stepping through a mud puddle onto your nice Venetian white rug. You carry residue into that house with you. And when we are constantly switching between tasks, there's residue. We are not as efficient. We're not as clean as we should be, because we're trying to multitask, do all these different things at once. We don't do anything well. So I think it's really identifying, what is it that we need to be doing? What are the biggest values we bring to our business and to our clients and to our team, and execute those things first, and then fill in the other space.
Yeah, absolutely well said. We touch on that in the book as well, Achieving Balance, about the multitasking really isn't multitasking, it's switch tasking. You're trying to do one thing and you're switching to another, and the time in between the switch is where the wasted time happens. Because really our minds can't do two really high powered things at the same time. A computer looks like it does, but it actually doesn't either, unless it has two, oh goodness, what is it called? Two chips that are running the processor. There you go, two processors. But most of the time our brain doesn't work like that. We can't. In order to focus, we have to be here. We have to be present. Yet our society struggles with being present, yes, doesn't it? And so I harken back to what you said earlier, like I'm home, and when I'm home, my phone goes on silent. I don't have the distractions. It gets put away. I'm the same way. I take my phone and I put it in a spot by the front door, and I take off my watch at dinner time. So like there's nothing going on. Like I'm there with my family because they're super important to me. And those are my highest priorities. So I love that you mentioned this. And that one of the most sinister things is doing efficiently well what that doesn't need to be done at all. That's gold. I know I paraphrase it, but that is gold, because there are a lot of us that do that, unfortunately, right? We're not being as effective with the things we need to be doing. I talk about working in your sweet spot all the time. And if we're not there, I've found that advisors are only there about a quarter of their day is in their sweet spot. And that's probably because they're doing these other things. What advice would you give to advisors who either are business owners or they're wanting to own their own practice and business someday? What would you tell them if you could give some advice to them now that would be helpful for balanced growth?
I think number one is being clear about what you want this thing to look like. We have to do that with our clients. A lot of investors don't really invest. They just collect investments. That's very different than strategically building towards a desired outcome. I think a lot of business owners don't have a desired outcome. They're just, hey, Travis, you can fog a mirror. If you're willing to sign this IRA application, you can be my client. They don't have a vision for they want this to look like, even for who they want to work with. They don't know who their ideal clients are. So I think all those things are important to kind of work backwards. Like, what do we want this to look when it's done, or maybe not done, but in 5 years, in 10 years, and build strategically towards that. The other thing I would say is really focusing on what I can control. There's a lot of things I can't control. I can't control the market's going to do. I can't control the outcome of a meeting. I may really want you as a client, Travis, but I can't control that. I can tell you the truth. I can explain my value proposition, and I can show you what I can do. But ultimately, I can't force you to become a client. I think a lot of advisors, they set the wrong goals based on outcomes rather than inputs. And that's been really freeing for me, is focusing on leveraging what I can control. Not the outcome, but trusting the process and realizing that if I continue to execute the input, continue to execute the process with excellence, the outcome will take care of itself. And if it doesn't, I need to look at that process again and say, is there a disconnect in here somewhere? Is there something wrong with my process that it isn't as connected to the outcome that I'm looking for? I'll just give you an example. Nick Murray wrote a book called The Game of Numbers, and he flipped prospecting for me. A lot of people set goals based on, I want to bring on this many new clients every month, or this much AUM, or have this many appointments. And the problem is, if my goal is to meet with 30 people every month and I've only met with 10 and there's 5 days less than a month, I'm meeting with anybody at this point to hit that goal. People I should not be meeting with that don't really want to be helped. And we end up lowering our standards. But if I set my goal as I'm going to call 50 leads or prospects this week, they might not answer the phone. They might cuss me out. They might tell me, Chad, I hope your dog dies. Don't ever call me again. That's fine. The win is not in the result. The win is in I made 50 attempts. I got on the phone, dialed 50 numbers. The outcome, that's not up to me. And I think there's a lot of ways we can look at that. I mean, even from a health standpoint, I can't control how quickly I lose weight, but I can make a point to, I'm not going to eat past 6 p.m. or I'm going to fast 1 day a week, or I'm going to go to the gym and run 3 days in the morning. Some days are going to go better than others, but I'm going to commit to the process and execute what I can control. And I think that's important for clients as well. But if we're not doing that, how do we tell our clients to commit to a budget, to commit to a financial plan, to commit to executing what they can control? So that's the advice I would give.
Love it. I mean, what you can control. And that is such an issue because so many of us, we don't even spend our time thinking about that, right? It's just not the mindset that a lot of advisors are in. They're just trying to do more and more and more instead of maybe even asking the question, should I even be doing this? I have a process every day that I run through that I ask myself, should I even be doing this? Right? Every single day. So my mind is constantly practicing that. I'm not perfect at it, but it is a great practice. So I appreciate you bringing this up, Chad. It's been a pleasure. If advisors want to reach out to you, know more about you and your firm, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, our website is veritasalaska.com. And my office number is 907-561-2462. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us. And I really appreciate you having me on and being able to talk back and forth and have this banter. And it's so important for advisors to be strong personally and professionally so they can be the strength for their clients. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for being a sounding board, for an example. This industry and business owners everywhere need to hear what you're saying today, right? Not just for me, because I wrote the book, or from others who are the authors, but advisors like you who are growing their practice strategically and keeping their balance. So thank you for being part of this show and for being willing to share.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
Absolutely. If you love this, like, share, subscribe, jump on, the podcast and give us a great rating, because we love hearing from you. Send us an email. You can send me an email personally to travis@maketimeinstitute.com. Tell us how we're doing with the podcast. We've loved this. We've produced over 75 episodes. And if you're listening to this one, just know there's a lot more to come. And your feedback is incredibly helpful. So thank you. Remember, as always, live life on purpose.